I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok. This is what he does.
You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray. These people been lying to us, y'all. I'm talking about lying. You got white Jesus statues all over the place, and white Jews all up and down the Hollywood movies. Watching the Ten Commandments a couple years ago. You got these white folks over in Egypt in that hot sun doing all that slave labor. It don't even make no sense. So anyway, guys, thank you guys for joining us on this podcast. So this podcast, this is actually not a new one. It's actually a remake of the very first podcast that I did last year. And it's the 20 reasons that convinced me that the Israelites and the Jews of that Bible were black and still are black today. So let's get into it. Here's the table of contents. If you guys want to take a screenshot of it, I'm not going to go through and say all the table of contents. We're going to go through it one by one. But before we get started, I want to give you guys some important information on Shem's lineage. So if you read the Bible, then you know the story about Noah, how he and his 3 sons and their wives went into the ark, and they were the 8 people who were saved from the flood. And then after the flood, it was Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japeth, and their wives that repopulated the entire earth. So Shem, he is the father of the Semitic or the Shemite people. And then from Shem, you get Eber. And then from Eber is actually where that word Hebrew comes from. And then from Eber down the line, you get Abraham, then Isaac, and then you get Jacob. Jacob had his name changed to Israel. He had 12 sons, 1 daughter, and his 12 sons would eventually become the 12 tribes of Israel. So when you're saying Israel or Israelite, you're talking about all 12 tribes collectively and not just one tribe. Now, when you say Judah or Jew, you're speaking specifically about one tribe. And the Judah, that's the 4th son of Jacob, from which the term Jew comes from. It's also the lineage from which we get the kings such as David and Hezekiah and Solomon. Also, Jesus comes from that lineage of Judah as well. So in English, we say Judah or Jew. In Hebrew, it would be pronounced Yahuda or Yahudim because the letter J, it's not in the Hebrew alphabet, and it wasn't in our English alphabet until about 400 years ago. So according to the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, the definition of Shem, Ham, and Japheth are as follows. And you guys can follow these links here below to actually fact check me. Make sure I ain't out here telling you lies, okay? Because your pastors and your theologians, they've been lying to you for centuries and decades. I'm trying to give you some truth. So here we go. So Shem, he's defined as dusky, dark, somewhat dark, swarthy, dark-skinned. So he's described as being, not black, but having dark skin, like a reddish, brownish, dark brown tone. Ham is described as being black, very dark skin, having very dark pigmentation. And Ham is believed to be the producer of the African nations that we see today. So Egypt, Ethiopia, Canaan, Libya, the Phoenicians, etc. Shem, he's the producer or the progenitor of the Northeast African nations, the Southeast Asian nations. And then Japheth, his definition is white or fair-skinned, and he's the producer of the white European and the Northern Asian races, Greece, Germany, Russia, Spain, Italy, etc. And this is a good link right here. This guy, Truth Unedited, I follow him on YouTube, and he gives a good breakdown of the origin of the races according to Genesis chapter 10. Also, what's important is according to Genesis chapter 10, verse 5, that term Gentiles is a term that's applied to the descendants of Japheth or the white European races. Another good piece of information to know is that in Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary, this is probably the most reputable Bible dictionary out there. Ham is described as being the progenitor of the dark races, but not the Negroes. So this is the actual definition of Ham. It says that the youngest son of Noah, born probably 96 years before the flood, one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, Canaanites, etc. So they're telling us that the Negroes don't come from Ham. So if the Negroes don't come from Ham, Negroes must come from Shem, because Shem produced dark races of people as well. And Japeth is the producer of the white European races that we see today. All right, so here we go. First point, and these are the 20 things that really had me convinced. Okay, about 2 years ago, I was challenged on my beliefs because I grew up believing that Jesus was the white-skinned man with the long blonde hair. Grew up believing that the people that I've known as Jews for 35 years of my life were actually the true Jews of the Bible. See it in TV, see it in movies, see it in statues, even in churches, guys. Unfortunately, we shouldn't have graven images, but even in the majority of our churches and seminaries, we have these false images of a white Jesus. So the first thing that convinced me was just the description of the Father and Jesus and the angels described as being dark-skinned individuals with woolly hair. You can read Daniel 10:5-6. That's a description of Daniel seeing Yahusha, whom folks call him Jesus. I say Yahusha, try to use his Hebrew name. Daniel 10:5-6 describes him as having arms and feet burnt bronze in color. So they're not burnt bronze. He said specifically it's burnished bronze in color. Revelation 1, chapter 13-15, same description. The man having burnt bronze feet and his hair white like wool. So when the Bible says white like wool, it's not necessarily saying that it's white like the color wool, because there's black wool, there's brown wool, there's various different colors of sheep. So it's talking about the texture of the hair being woolly and thick and curly. Revelation 2:18, you have Jesus himself saying that he has feet of fine brass. Daniel 7:9, this is the description of the Ancient of Days, Heavenly Father, talks about his hair and his heads being like the pure wool. Again, that thick, woolly hair, curly hair texture. And then Ezekiel, in his vision, Ezekiel 40:3, he sees a vision of an angel who has the appearance of bronze. So you got all these various beings in the scriptures. You have Jesus, you have the Father, you have these various angels that are described as having the appearance of bronze. Here in Ezekiel chapter 1, 26-28, it's describing a man on the throne who's possibly either the Heavenly Father or the Son on the throne. Talks about how his waist upward he saw the color of amber. And again, if you look at the color of amber right here to the right, you have a raw amber, which is, kind of has that brownish, butterscotch, yellowish color to it. So it's like a kind of a light tan, dark, tan brown. And then you have some fire polished amber stones right here, and these are a more darker mahogany color. Yeah, that's kind of a mahogany color right there. Now, when you go to Google, and I encourage you guys to do this, just so that way you know that I'm not giving you any type of BS or blowing smoke. Go to Google and just type in brass statue. You could type in brass or bronze, because in the Bible, that word brass and bronze, they're interchangeable. And depending on what version you're reading, if you're reading New King James, NIV, King James Version, you'll either see brass or bronze. So that word, they're interchangeable. So go on Google, type in brass statue or bronze, and this is what you get. You get these statues that are this brownish, dark brown color. And all you got to do is ask yourself, hey, what group of people do I know that represent this color? Right? Pretty self-explanatory. And right here goes some pictures of people with woolly hair. Right here is a sheep, and you can see the texture of the hair. That even looks like an afro. I mean, you see it, it's really thick, it's poofy, just like the hair of the young Michael Jackson here, who he used to be black too. They did Michael Jackson just like they did Jesus. Michael Jackson grew up, he was born a young, handsome black man with woolly hair, but then as he got older, he morphed into being a white woman with thin, long hair. Just like Jesus, right? Just like Jesus over here. You know, this man right here, he was born in a hot region of the world, went over to Egypt and hid out. So he had dark skin and woolly hair. But then as he got older, somehow they morphed his image into being this white, feminized, woman-looking image. But again, I'm showing you guys this just so you can see the texture of woolly hair. This is wool, and that hair texture more represents Morgan Freeman, Dick Gregory, these guys down here, as opposed to the Europeans over here. And you look at the skin of bronze, and their skin more closely represents the color of bronze or brass, as opposed to this ivory skin here. So number 2, read the Bible and you see various biblical writers and figures describing themselves with dark skin. Songs of Solomon, you have the writer of the Songs of Solomon, whether it's Solomon's lover or Solomon himself, but they're describing themselves as being black and comely. Lamentations 4 and 8, Lamentations 5 and 10, this is the prophet Jeremiah writing about the children of Judah that were carried into captivity into Babylon, and he says that their face is blacker than the coal. Visage means face, and it says that their skin was black like an oven. Job 30:30. Job says that his skin was black upon him. Amos 9:7. This is God speaking to the children of Israel. And he says, "Are you not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel?" In some versions, this would say the children of the Cushites. Now, both that word Ethiopian and Cushite, it means black. Ethiopian means black or burnt skin in Greek. Cushite or Cushi means black in the Hebrew. Then down here you got Zephaniah describing himself to be the son of Cushi. You have Moses, him and his Cushite wife. And then you have certain messengers in David's army that are described as being Cushi or black. And here we go. This is what color tints of Kedar are. And this is black. This is more than bronze. This is very burnt bronze. All right, this is all right. So you got a black goat right here, and then right here you got black coals. So again, pretty self-explanatory as to what color the tints of Kedar or black coals are. It's black, and we see people that have this color today. We call them black, unless they East Indian. Because look, at some of those East Indians, they got skin that's blacker than us that are called Negroes or black. So that term black, it's not really, I don't know, it's kind of a stupid term because it doesn't really reflect the color of those of us that are truly called black. Most of our skin is from light brown to dark brown, reddish brown. It's not actually black like the color of these words here. So anyway, here we go again. Genesis 2:7 describes Adam being made from the dust of the earth. So if Adam was made from the dust of the earth and formed from the dust of the earth, you can look at the color of the earth and see what color Adam was. And if you look at the dust of the earth, it is various forms of brown. So you got light brown here, you got a dark reddish brown, you got a burgundy brown here, and then right here, you got kind of a black. I guess that's probably some dirt, some wet dirt. When you wet the dirt, it turns like black mud. Now here's something that's very interesting. Genesis 1:26 says that God made Adam in his image and likeness. Image and likeness is not just characteristics and qualities, but also the physical image, the physical appearance. It's kind of like my son. I have a son made in my image and likeness. So he has the same color as me. He has the same features. He has 2 limbs, 2 legs, a penis, everything that I have, because he's made in my image. So if Adam was made as a dark-skinned, woolly-haired man, and he's made in the image of God, that means that God must have the appearance of a dark-skinned, woolly-haired man as well. All right, number 3, we got the Israelites that were always being mistaken as Egyptians. Egyptians. And when I say Egyptians, I'm not talking about the new school Egyptians that are more remnants of the Ottoman Turkish Arab invasion. I'm talking about those old school black Egyptians that are on the artwork in the pyramids. So right here, we got in Genesis 42, 6 through 8, we got Joseph mistaken as an Egyptian by his very own brothers. Right? So if Joseph was a white dude and he was amongst these black folks, it'd have been easy for his brothers to pick him out. We got Genesis chapter 50, 7 through 11. We got Jacob's or Israel's household when they were burying him. The Canaanites in that land mistook them for being Egyptians. You got Moses here in Exodus 2, 17 through 19. He was mistaken as an Egyptian by the lady who would eventually become his wife. Her and her sisters mistook him for being an Egyptian. Also, Moses grew up in the house of Pharaoh. So if Moses grew up in the house of Pharaoh, he must have looked like an Egyptian because Moses grew up in a time when Pharaoh was trying to kill all of the little Hebrew boys. Acts 21, 37 through 38. We got Paul the Apostle, who was mistaken as an Egyptian by a Greek soldier. And then last but not least, we got Jesus, the Christ, who in Matthew 2, 13 through 17, his parents took him and they fled to Egypt to blend in amongst the people and hide out from Herod. Now, if Jesus was a little white baby boy with some thin, long, blonde hair, they probably wouldn't have taken him to Egypt to hide out. Probably would have taken them to the Caucasus Mountains, taken them to Russia, Germany, Rome, somewhere other than going into Egypt. They went to Egypt for a reason. And here goes some photos of the ancient Egyptians from their hieroglyphs. And as you can see, these are all dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. You see some perms, some jerry curls. You got some weaves, these big old earrings. This is all stuff that we see black people today wearing, right? These big old Shaniqua earrings, afros, jerry curls, all that dark-skinned, woolly hair. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You look at these, look at the skin tone, look at these folks. Who do they represent today? Here goes some more. This is from the King Tut exhibit that me and my family went to in LA at the California Science Center. Again, they're depicted as having dark skin, afros, jerry curls. You got the Sphinx here with his big thick lips and the thick nose that they try to blow it off, but the nose was so thick that they couldn't even blow all of it off. That's how thick the features are. So when you look at the features of these Egyptians here, it doesn't really resemble the folks that we call Jews today, right? Netanyahu and Mark Zuckerberg, Seinfeld, they don't really look anything close to these Egyptians and these Hebrew slaves that we see portrayed on the walls in Egypt. But these folks right here more closely resemble them, right? The cast of Moesha, the cast of my favorite theme song of all time, Living Single, right? That's the best theme song of all time, probably, you know? We are living, hey, single. Ooh, in a 90s kind of world. I'm glad I got my girl. Keep your head up, what? I'm telling you, man, that's the best theme song of all time. You got Good Times, Blackish. These folks right here more closely resemble those Egyptians and those Hebrew slaves that we see on the walls of Egypt. And this is what Hollywood gives us as Egyptians. These folks don't look like nothing like no Egyptians. These just look like some white people playing dress up for Halloween. That's all it looks like, right? They don't even, it doesn't even fit. it doesn't even fit, man. All right, so point number 4, we got the Hebrews and the Israelites interbreeding with black Hamite nations. So we got you got Abraham and Hagar, Abraham and Keturah. You got Joseph and Asenath. These are Egyptian women. Abraham's wife, Hagar, she's an Egyptian. His other wife, Keturah, she was either a Canaanite or a Cushite. You got Judah and his Canaanite wife. You got Judah and Tamar. Tamar, she was a Canaanite. So you have all these places in the scripture. Moses with his Cushite wife, David and Bathsheba, and David and his other wife, Maacah, they were Canaanites. You got the Israelites who are sitting here mixing and mingling with all of these Hamite nations, Egyptians, Philistines, Canaanites, Hittites, Puttites, all the ites, Cushites, all of them. And these women, they are all women. The Hamite women, they're all women that come from the lineage of Ham, who was the father of the black African nations that we know of today. Here in 1 Kings 11, you got Solomon and his many wives. And out of Solomon's wives, none of them are mentioned to be Gentiles or descendants of Japeth. They were all primarily Hamites with a couple of Shemites mixed in there. You got here in Leviticus 24, you got the Israelite woman with her Egyptian husband when they came from out of slavery in Egypt. And then here in the book of Judges, chapter 3, 5 through 6, and Ezra 9, 1 through 2, the prophets talk about how the children of Israel were mixing their seed with the Canaanites, the Moabites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites. Again, these are all black Hamite nations. So what that led me to believe when I first started reading this is, okay, if Israel started off white, they didn't end up white after hundreds, or actually about 1,000 years of mixing with the Hamite nations. Because just look at our nation here in America. A lot of us black folks, we actually descend from white slave owners who raped and impregnated black women. I know my 4 times great grandfather, he's a white man that impregnated one of his black female slaves. And when you look at the lineage from that union, all of us look black. Okay, when you mix the white genes with the black genes, you get black. So if these Israelites, they started off white, they sure ain't stay white, man. Didn't. No way. Number 5, you got black Hamite people that are mentioned in the lineage of Jesus. So you read Matthew chapter 1, 1 through 17. This is the genealogy of Jesus through Joseph. And in Luke chapter 3, 23 through 38, this is the genealogy of Jesus through Mary. Now in both genealogies, you have Hamite women that are mentioned throughout that genealogy. Okay, you got Rahab and Tamar, Bathsheba. You got all various types of Hamite women. So what that showed me was that the DNA of the true Jews, the true people of the tribe of Judah, it's actually a mixture of Semitic and Hamitic blood. And then number 6, we got the Israelites who left Egypt as a mixed multitude. So the Israelites, they were called out of Egypt. They were called out of an African country. They were in an African country for 400 years as slaves, and then God called them out of that country. According to Hosea 11:1, Matthew 2:15, the book says that out of Egypt I've called forth my son. So out of Africa, out of this African country, I've called forth my son. And when you read the book of Exodus 12:37 through 38, and Leviticus 24:10, you see that the Israelites, they mixed in and intermingled with the Egyptians. And the book says in Exodus that they left as a mixed multitude, 600,000 men. And the estimates are outside of just the 600,000 men, there was about another 2 to 2.5 million women and children, because the women and children usually outnumber the men. Now, when you look at Israel's history from the time that they entered Egypt around 1700 BC up until the time that they began to be scattered through the Assyrian captivity in 720 BC, the Israelites interbred and they intermarried with Hamite African nations, and they were mainly in Hamite lands, the land of Egypt, the land of Canaan, the land of the Philistines, the land of Cush. They were mainly in those nations, intermingling and mixing with those people. So again, after 1,000 years of intermixing with black Hamite nations, even if you started off white, you're going to eventually become black. Now, I'm of the opinion that the Israelites weren't white people mixing in with black people, but the Israelites felt comfortable mixing in and being amongst these black Hamitic people because the Israelites themselves were dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. They looked like black folks, and they had things in common. And then 7, curse of white leprosy. So for all the time that I've been a Christian in church, I had this false idea, and it comes from the pastors and the leaders, that leprosy was a skin condition where you had boils and bumps break out in your skin. But according to Leviticus chapters 13 and 14, leprosy caused the skin to turn white and the hair to turn yellow. It's more comparable to the condition today that we know as albinism or vitiligo, where you have a dark-skinned person who has a skin condition and their skin turns white, they get white patches, or you have two black people that produce a baby who doesn't have any melanin, and the baby comes out with white skin and yellow hair. And if you look in the scriptures, you see various cases where the Most High cursed people with leprosy. Numbers 12, 9 through 10, you have Miriam, Moses' sister. She was upset that Moses married a Cushite woman, and God cursed her with leprosy, said that her skin turned white as snow. Now, in order for Miriam's skin to turn white as snow, it couldn't have started off white as snow. Okay, there's no curse in somebody who's already white having their skin turn whiter. 2 Kings 5:27, this is the servant of Elisha, Gehazi, who had his skin cursed with leprosy. The Bible says not only would he have leprosy, but his descendants, his generations after him, would be cursed with leprosy as well. Again, leprosy, and it talks about how his skin was turned white as snow. Now, in order for your skin to turn white, it can't already be white. And then here, Exodus 4, 6 through 7, as a sign to Pharaoh, God caused Moses' hand to turn white as a leper. The book says that Moses took his hand, put it into his bosom, pulled it out, and it became white as snow. Then Moses put his hand back into his bosom, took it out, and it was restored as the other flesh. Now, in order for his skin to turn white again, couldn't be white. In order for his white hand to be restored as the other flesh, that means that the other flesh was not white as snow. Then number 8, we got man Bob Marley. All right, we got the Hebrews who are described with hairstyles of modern blacks. So when you read Numbers chapter 6, 5, talks about the law of the Nazarenes, how they let their hair grow long in locks. Ezekiel 8:3, Ezekiel 44:20, talks about how the Nazarites have long locky hair. Ezekiel actually had dreadlocks as well. It talks about how God pulled him by a lock of his hair. And then Judges, Samson, he was a Nazarite who had dreadlocks as well. Now these locks are what we call dreadlocks, and it's when guys like Bob Marley just let the hair go and it just gets all thick and crinkled and all crumpled up like Bob Marley's hair here. And it's not these little locks of strands that the Ashkenazi Jews try to portray over there in Israel. The book also describes Solomon as having locks as well. And in addition to having locks, it says that Solomon's skin was white and ruddy. So at first I was thinking, all right, maybe that means Solomon was white. He was a white dude running around with dreadlocks. Right. But then, I thought about the fact that, hey, those of us that are called black, there's some of us that actually have white skin. You look at J. Cole or Prince or Sinbad, and their skin is as white as some white people's. Now you could tell they're black because of the features, but it's possible for us black folks to have white skin if we don't produce as much melanin, or if you're like J. Cole and you're of a mixed race. And then in Timothy, and also in 1 Timothy and 1 Peter, it's talking about women having braids and plaited hair and broided hair, all this type of stuff. And the braids that they're talking about are the braids that you typically see on black women. You see on Moesha or on old school Beyonce with her braids. So, I started reading this stuff and saying, man, this is describing, it's talking about braids and plaited hair and broided hair and whatnot. Just all type of light bulbs started going off in my head. Like, man, this is talking about some black women. All right, then number 9, we have the Hebrews, especially the tribe of Judah, which was the southern tribe, because of Solomon's sin of getting into paganism with all his foreign wives. Dude had 700 wives, 300 concubines, and a lot of them were foreign women who were in pagan worship. So he naturally got into pagan worship because the women that he was messing with were in pagan worship. The kingdom was split in two. So you had the northern kingdom, which was the kingdom of Israel, and then you had the southern kingdom, which was the kingdom of Judah. And the kingdom of Judah was the kingdom that was closest to the mainland continent of Africa. So whenever they got in trouble, whenever there was some type of persecution in the land, they would flee into Africa to escape. And you could read about this in Jeremiah 43 and 2 Kings 25 and 26, when it talks about the Jews fleeing into Africa to escape the Chaldeans that were coming against them. You also got Mary and Joseph and Jesus that fled into Egypt to escape from King Herod. And then if you read some literature such as Babylon and Timbuktu, you read Flavius Josephus, the Great Roman Jewish War, or the New Complete Works, it talks about how the Jews of the Southern Kingdom would flee into Africa to escape Roman persecution. And then 10, start doing research and you find out that, hey, there's a lot of Israelite DNA and culture and customs found all throughout Africa. I mean, you have African tribes like the Igbo people, or the Limba tribe in South Africa. The Igbo people are in Nigeria. Then you have the Falashas that are in Eastern Africa, and all these various tribes of people that get DNA testing and find out, hey, these folks have Semitic blood. Their blood is not Hamitic. Their blood is actually Semitic. And there's various rabbis that actually, like Harry Rosenberg, they actually confirm that Jews fled into Africa during the invasion of Rome in 70 AD and the destruction of the temple. And you have various tribes throughout Africa, like the Ashanti and the Tutsi and B'nai Ephraim, all these various tribes in Africa that have a story connected to a people who fled into Africa from Israel. And there's several regions in Africa right now where till this day they are circumcising their children on the 8th day. They have animal sacrifices, they have ritual cleaning, they have multiple wives, they stone people for certain types of sins. So that culture of the New Testament of the book, it runs all up and down throughout Africa. And then when you read several books, it speaks about how about Israelite customs and Israelite cultures and Jewish kingdoms that arrived or that were built up in Africa. And then if you look in some of the old historic maps, you can actually see a kingdom of Judah on some of these old maps. And here goes a list of the maps here. You guys can take a screenshot, check them out for yourself. But I don't think that's a coincidence that you have a kingdom of Judah on some of these old maps that were before 1800s. And then point 11, when you read the scriptures, you see that there were black people who were amongst the early church leaders and followers. You have one of Jesus' own disciples is described as a Canaanite, Simon the Canaanite. And the Canaanites, those were people that come from Ham. You have Mark. In Mark 15:21, you have Simon of Cyrene or Libya. This is the man who helped Jesus carry his cross. And then in Romans, you have Paul greeting Rufus, who's the son of Simon. And the book of Acts, you have the Ethiopian man who was going up to Jerusalem to worship and keep a feast day. You have in the book of Acts 13:1, Simon called Niger and Lucius of Cyrene. So Niger, that is actually where the word nigger comes from, but it represents a people who live along the Niger River or the Niger Valley in Africa. And that area of the Niger River, that's an area where they took slaves. So they would call the people Nigers. And at some point there was another G added and they began being called niggers. So what we see in the scriptures is long before you had the Gentile Europeans grafted in, you had black Hamite folks that were amongst the early church leaders, and they probably were amongst the early church leaders because they all looked the same and had things in common. And 12, this is probably the biggest thing that made me believe that blacks that the children of Israel are black, and it's the reason why I believe that us Negroes who descend from slaves are of the children of Israel, because the Bible actually prophesied the various slave trades that would scatter the Israelites and the Jews amongst the world. So here in Deuteronomy 28:68, it actually says that God is going to take them back into Egypt or into slavery in ships. Deuteronomy 28:64 says that the Lord is going to scatter them amongst all the peoples from one end of the earth to the other, because he knew that they would disobey and break the covenant. Leviticus 26:33 says, I'm going to scatter you among the nations, draw the sword after you. And then we have Jesus, the Messiah, who in one of his final messages to his disciples told them that the Israelites, specifically the Jews of the southern kingdom, were going to be scattered and led away captive into all nations, and that Jerusalem would be trampled by Gentiles. And you can read about that in Luke 21:22 through 24. So as I read the book, I began to see that the Most High, he always punished his people with slavery. Slavery was one of the forms of punishment that God would use to reprimand his people for breaking his covenant and turning on him. And the Israelites were slaves from the beginning. From Egypt to Assyria, Babylon, Book of Judges, the Israelites were always slaves. And that's because, unfortunately, our ancestors were always breaking the covenant. Now, when you look at the people that have been scattered into all nations, it's only one group of people that you think of. You don't think of the white Jews over in Israel today. You don't think of other groups of people that have been slaves like the Irish or Asians. No, you think of one group of people that were led away as slaves into all nations through the various slave trades, led into slavery into North America, South America, the Caribbean, Africa, Europe, Asia, all types of places, Australia. Here, Jeremiah 9:16, Ezekiel 20:23. You can read all these scriptures yourself, but it talks about how God was going to send his people into slavery and scatter them into all nations of the earth for breaking his covenant and not repenting. And I still haven't found, guys, one group of people that fits these scriptures other than those of us who are called Negroes, black descendants of slaves. We call it Afro something, Afro-European, Afro-Asiatic, Afro-American, Afro-Latino. We call it Afro something, right? Go some more scriptures. Ezekiel 5, chapter 5, 9 through 12. Ezekiel 22, Ezekiel 12. Again, all these scriptures. And the slave trades of the Arab slave trade, transatlantic slave trade, Indian Ocean slave trade. These are all things that are prophetic and are a fulfillment of all these various scriptures concerning the Israelites being scattered into all nations. Now, the Israelites, they were being scattered during the time of Jesus and even before, but they weren't scattered into all the world. The slave trades that we had the past 1,000 years, that really scattered the Israelites into all areas of the world, into all countries. And then here, Jeremiah 17:4, it even says that God would cause the Israelites to let go of their heritage and to serve their enemies in the land which they don't know. So when you're talking about letting go of heritage, that's talking about letting go of your culture, your customs, losing your language, losing your identity, losing who you were. And that's what happened to us black folks during slavery. We were given new names, we were given a new culture, new customs, we had the memory of us erased, we basically forgot any anything about who we were in the past. So we fit that scripture of Jeremiah 17:4 of letting go of our heritage. And then when you read about the curses of disobedience in Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, these are the curses of breaking the covenant. And I haven't found anybody that fits these more than those of us that are called black. Talks about the Most High sending a nation against them that's from afar, that's as swift as the eagle. And then when you look at these nations, the European nations that enslaved blacks, a lot of them have eagles as their emblem. Whether it's America, whether it's Britain, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, they all have eagles that represent them. Talks about his people going into slavery. Talks about no one's going to save them. They're going to bear children that go into slavery. The foreigner or the alien is going to rise higher than them. They're going to be defeated by their enemies continually and oppressed. All right, talks about a yoke of iron being put on their neck, and our ancestors had yokes of iron that were put around their neck, being scattered, having a wife, but somebody else, your slave master, is sleeping with her. I mean, all these various curses, guys, in Deuteronomy 28 and 26, and then the prophets. They're assigned to show that these are the people of Israel, but it also happened because of our ancestors breaking the covenant. Again, talks about us being hidden in prison houses, Isaiah 42:22, women having hair issues, those who hate us are going to rule over us. All these things, guys, right? And there's nobody that fulfills those curses that I found, unlike the people that we call black Negroes. And then you have historical references of the Jews having black skin and woolly hair. You have this guy Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was formerly the president of Egypt, and he said back in the 60s, he said, hey, we're not going to accept you Jews that are coming back over into Israel because you left here black but came back white. Right, so you got leaders over there in the Middle East that are confirming that, hey, the actual Jews that left here were black. And then you have the slaves here in America that identified themselves as being Israelites. And over in Virginia, there's a landmark to the Free Blacks of Israel Hill. And it mentions that these blacks are Israelites who had got their freedom. And then you can read all of these authors here, which many of these authors are non-black people. These authors are Europeans, they're explorers, they're researchers. Most of them are European folks that are saying, yeah, these Jews that we're finding all throughout Africa and through Southeast Asia, these are dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. You could read Herodotus or Tacitus, Zaphanes, Flavius Josephus, Sir Harry Johnson. Actually, Flavius Josephus, he describes Christ as being a short man with woolly hair and dark features and a unibrow. Like the what's the guy's name? Anthony Davis unibrow. But you guys take a screenshot of this here, and I encourage you guys to search out these books, read them for yourself. They're all on Amazon, pretty cheap, pretty short reads, and you can see that, yeah, these folks were describing the Jews as being dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. There's also a website you can go to as well, and there's a guy, Minister Dante Fortson, and he has a website which was probably the first website that I started to go to when I was researching blacks in the Bible, researching whether or not blacks were the Israelites of the Bible. He has a really good website. It's probably the best website out there in terms of getting information on blacks in the Bible and blacks being the Israelites. I think between him and his books and Ron Dalton and Hebrews and Negroes, they probably have the most concise and the most amount of research on the subject as anybody else out there. So follow this link right here, and he has various third-party sources from major universities and colleges ancient paintings and maps showing that, yeah, the Jews were a dark-skinned, woolly-haired people, and there were kingdoms of Jews all throughout Africa. He's also on YouTube as well. His YouTube is, what is it? I think it's Minister Dante Fortson or Dante Fortson, something. Just go on YouTube or go to his website, and his website, you can find his YouTube through the website. So 15, I started doing research on the early artwork of biblical figures, and prior to the Renaissance period of 1300, most of these ancient pictures of the Jews were dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. As a matter of fact, the oldest image of Christ and his disciples, which is at the museum in Cairo, Egypt, I believe. But that's an image of Christ being a dark-skinned, woolly-haired man, and then his disciples, they all have little afros and what have you. So go check out these links here. You got the Black Madonnas of Europe. You got even the Pope that's bowing down to the Black Madonnas, and all of these early artwork of the biblical figures wore black, dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. Now, around the time of the Renaissance, that's when you started getting people like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, Raphael. They started to take these ancient black paintings and then paint them as white people. Here goes some historical images of the Israelites going into captivity in Assyria. And this is the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. And he was the king during the time that the Israelites of the northern tribes were taken into captivity in Assyria. So right here you can see these Israelites are dark-skinned, woolly-haired, beaded-haired people. You got the thick nose and thick lips. Look a lot different than the people that we see today who are calling themselves Jews. Oh, and this is I'm going to play this for you guys real quick. This is on the Encyclopedia Britannica, their website, which if you guys like to do research, I encourage you to get a subscription. It's only $70 a year. Pretty good. But I was doing some research and I came across this video of Moses and the Israelites and the Israelite slaves portrayed on the pyramids or the tombs over in Egypt. So check it out. And it shows them as being some dark-skinned, woolly-haired people.
These drawings on the walls of a temple show the Hebrews, the people of Moses, long before he was commanded by God to deliver them from slavery. The drawings make it quite clear who was in charge. Here, a big, strong Egyptian demonstrates his power over groveling slaves. But who were these people in thrall to the Egyptians?
All right, that's all we need to see. All right, we didn't need to see much. I just wanted you guys to see that even in Britannica, which is, very reputable company that does research and has historical references, this, that, and the other, even they are showing that the ancient Israelites and the ancient Egyptians on those tombs and temples were dark-skinned, woolly-haired people, or people that we would refer to today as being black. And here goes some more evidence. These are some historical images of Semites. So Israel wasn't the only Semitic nation that was dark-skinned and woolly hair. The other Semitic people were also dark-skinned, woolly hair people as well. And if you look at these pictures down here, these are the Elamites, who are the ancient Medes and Persians, modern-day Iranians. And this is at the palace of Darius and Susa, and it shows them also as being a dark-skinned, woolly hair race of people. You see that dark brown skin color, and you see the thick, curly, black hair. Now, if these people were white, surely they had white paint that they could have used, because looking at their clothes, there was white paint available. So if these folks were white, they could have painted their faces white. But the fact that they painted them black, and they had these, kinky hair, thick noses and features, that shows that these people also were dark-skinned, woolly-haired people. Now, what's important to know is that prior to the invasion of European nations, such as the Greeks, the Ottoman Turks, the Byzantines, the Crusaders, the Middle East consisted of people that we would call black today. They were various ethnicities of dark-skinned, woolly-haired people with light brown skin, tan skin, dark skin, woolly-haired skin, etc. But as Europeans begin to invade that area more and more, the indigenous native people would get pushed out, and the folks that were left over, many of them the women at least, would be raped by these white Europeans, and they would produce a lighter skin, a lighter shade of people. So that's the reason why when you look at the Middle East today, or at least for what they show us on TV, a lot of the people don't look like this. They look more like some Eastern European people, because a lot of them are just remnants or leftovers from various European invasions. All right, then we got the melanin factor, right? This is another thing that was right in, this stuff has been right in front of our faces and we just don't see it. Okay, so melanin is that chemical in our body that gives us darker pigmentation and protects our skin from UV rays of the sun. Now, the hotter the area, the darker the skin is going to be to protect us from the UV rays of the sun. Now, when you look at the area that we call the Middle East, which is right here in this area, Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, Ethiopia, etc., this is one of the hottest places in the world. The Sahara Desert, Arab Desert, it's one of the hottest places in the world. There's no way that these people could have lived in this land without having dark skin. If they didn't have dark skin, if they had white skin like the Israelis over in Israel today, they would have all suffered from melanoma cancer, right? So in order for these people to live in this area, in order for the Israelites to work outdoors in the hot Egyptian sun for 400 years, they would have needed to have dark pigmentation. Now, when you look at these folks over here, who are the folks that we know as Jews today, there's no way that their skin would have been able to endure that hot African sun in this climate for thousands of years. It's just no way, right? But when you look over here at these, these black athletes, their skin and their tone would have been more suitable for working outdoors in Egypt and suitable for living in this land that we call Israel or the Middle East. And if you look at the folks over in Israel today, they suffer a lot from melanoma, skin cancer, because their skin is not meant for that climate. Since they're Eastern European peoples from Germany, Ashkenaz, Polish, etc., their skin is suitable for the climate of Eastern Europe. You take them out their climate, put them in the hot climate, now they're more at risk for melanoma skin cancer. And at one point in time, Israel had the second highest rate of melanoma skin cancer out of all the countries, only behind Australia. And then 17, when you start reading some of these extra biblical books, like the Book of Enoch, which the Book of Enoch, it was in some of the older Bibles, but they took it out of the Protestant Bible. When you read the Book of Enoch, it actually describes Enoch as being not Enoch. It describes Noah as being an albino. So Noah came out with white skin and blue eyes, and his father was afraid of him. And his father said, "Hey, I've begotten a son that's like the angels, right? That's like the sons of the angels." And I don't know, maybe when the angels were having sex with women, maybe they had albinos. Their children came out looking like albinos. I don't know. But I do know that when Noah came out of his mother's womb, his father, Lamech, was afraid of him and said, "Hey, this son doesn't look like me," right? Because Lamech and his people, they had dark skin, and they weren't used to seeing some white-skinned person come out of a black womb. And also, if you look at, there's an organization called NOAH, N-O-A-H, and it's the National Organization of Albinism and Hypopigmentation. And they're actually named after Noah because based off the Dead Sea Scrolls, which had the Book of Enoch, Noah is believed to be the first albino born. So the fact that Lamech, Noah's father, was afraid of how he looked shows that Lamech and his people looked a lot different than Noah, who had albino features. So 18, the book says that the real Jews are going to be scattered as a result of slavery, and that the Jews are not going to be gathered into their land until Christ returns. So you can read all this. You can read Amos 9 through 15. You can read Deuteronomy and Isaiah. Just take a screenshot of all of these scriptures here and read them. Check them out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Make sure I'm not taking anything out of context. But according to what we read in the scriptures, even the book of Joel chapter 3, the book says that the Israelites, Israel and Judah, they are going to be scattered into all nations, and they are going to be in the land of their captivity until the Christ returns. So they're going to remain in all these lands where they were carried away captive until Christ returns, and then he's going to gather his people and bring them into their land, and also bring in people who were grafted into Israel through faith in the Messiah. And then when you read, there's certain books that European Jews themselves have written. There's DNA researchers like Eran El Hayek and guys like Shlomo San, Arthur Kessler, Benjamin Friedman. These are European Jews who have put out research themselves to say that, hey guys, we're not Semitic people. We're Eastern European converts. We are Russians and Polish, German, Eastern European peoples who converted over to the religion of the Jews around 800 AD. So take a screenshot of these books and check them out. 19, the Bible says that Israel will forget who they are, and that they will discontinue from their heritage. And you can read the scriptures here: Jeremiah 17:4, Psalm 83, 3 through 4, Deuteronomy 32, 26. And if you got the Apocrypha, you can read the book of Baruch 2, 30 through 35. And it just talks about how Israel and Judah were going to forget who they are. The memory of them is going to cease from amongst men. And that's what has happened, guys, to us blacks that have been scattered into all nations. People don't know where we come from. We don't know anything about our heritage or our history prior to the 1500s when we were taken as slaves, right? At least not in the mainstream. People don't know. Like if you actually do some digging and research, you can figure out who we are. But in the mainstream, the general public, nobody has any idea where us black folks come from, who we were, what our identity was, what was our faith, our beliefs, nothing. And that's a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And I don't think it's a coincidence, guys, that the Bible says that Israel and Judah will forget who they are, discontinue from their heritage, but then you have us Negroes who we have a lost identity, we have a lost heritage, we had our names erased, our history erased, our heritage, artifacts, anything having to do with our past has been erased. And then last but not least, when I compare the sufferings of Christ, and I also compare the things that happened to Israelites in the Bible, it parallels, and it's pretty close to what happens to us blacks today and what happened to our ancestors, right? You look at Christ. Christ was born in a lower class minority, I guess you can call it, right? He was born in a lower class ethnic group, and he was in a land that was a land of his people, but you had white folks that was controlling it. Doesn't that sound like folks over in Africa and over in Middle East or over in various parts of the world where, hey, you're born into this land that you and your people have, and it was historically your people's, but you got some white Europeans that's controlling it. You got the Bible talking about Christ being hung on the tree. Coincidence that us black folks, our ancestors, were hung on trees. You got during the time of Jesus and the time of Moses, you had this concentrated effort to kill the Hebrew baby boys. And what a coincidence that here in America, you had a concentrated effort to kill black people, to depopulate black people, to make black women infertile, to make black women lose their fertility, to put abortion clinics into our communities through Margaret Sanger, who wanted to kill black babies. You have Christ, who was stripped naked, mocked, and beaten by his enemies. That happened to black folks every day during slavery. You got the Israelites that were taken into captivity in Egypt for 400 years. Is it a coincidence that black people in America have been captive for 400 years? You have Israelites, slaves in Babylon that had their names changed, right? Daniel had his name changed to Belteshazzar. It's some crazy names, right? Hananiah to Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, all this stuff. Is it a coincidence that the Israelite slaves over here in America also had their names changed as well? And that's the reason why us Israelites today, we walking around with names of Washington and Smith and Carter and Johnson and Jackson and all this other type of stuff. But these are not our original names. These are names that were given to us by our slaveholders, in the same way that the slaveholders of Babylon gave the Jews their name. And unfortunately, guys, it's not a coincidence that folks will try to turn Jesus white, because they've done it to it's happened to many black people throughout history. Jesus is probably the most notable example, but you got Michael Jackson, who he went from black to white. Sammy Sosa went from black to white. Iman and LaToya Jackson, all these are folks that was born dark skin, woolly hair, and all of a sudden they just then become white. So anyway, man, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. I pray that you guys repent, believe in Yahuwah, and believe in his son Yahusha. And I want to leave you guys with some books that I recommend reading. Take a screenshot of this. These are some books that really helped me to find the truth, and it all matches up. All these books match up with stuff I find on history, stuff that I find in the Bible. I think the best book that I've read on the subject so far is Hebrews and Negroes by Ron Dalton. It's probably the most complete book on the subject. He also has movies too, so if you guys don't like to read, you can watch his movies. I think he has 3 of them. Pretty good movies. Go to HebrewsandNegroes.net or .com something, and you can order some DVDs of his movies. And here's some folks on YouTube that you can check out that I watch frequently, help me to understand the truth. Dante Fortson, Steve Darby, Truth Unveiled, Pastor Charles Dow, Watchman Reports. Really good really good YouTube channels. Ron Dalton, Seven Trumpets Prepper. So these are some folks that I really recommend you guys watching and listening. I don't agree with every single thing that they teach, but I don't know, probably 90%, 95% of the stuff they say is legit and good and accurate. So check them out, read them, research them, keep the good and throw out the bad. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting. If you guys want a copy of this PowerPoint, you can follow this link below to download it, or you can just send me an email and I'll email you the PowerPoint. See you guys on the next podcast.